Happy Wednesday, or as they say in Washington, take out the trash day.
Yes.
Good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome all of you to the January 20th Finance and Audit Committee meeting. I'd like to first recognize that we are gathered on the traditional territory of the Snuneymuxw First Nation. Our clerk this morning will be Ms. Sky Snellgrove. And as always, today's Finance and Audit Committee meeting will be held in accordance with the Community Charter, Council Procedure Bylaw 2018, number 7272, and Ministerial Order number M192 governing open meetings during a state of emergency and the Provincial Health Officer Order regarding gatherings and events. Therefore, members of the public are required to observe meetings virtually and not attend in person, and question period will be suspended throughout the duration of the provincial health orders in effect. The first item on the agenda is the introduction of late items, and I understand we don't have any. Motion for approval of the agenda. Moved Councillor Thorpe, seconded Councillor Hemmens. All those in favour? Opposed? Motion carries. A motion for adoption of the minutes is circulated. Moved Councillor Hemmens, seconded Councillor Thorpe. All those in favour? Motion carries. We don't have any presentations this morning, no delegations, but we do have a number of reports, and the first is Sustainable Procurement Policy and Procurement Policy Update. Ms. Legan, please. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Your Worship and Council. It's wonderful to be here with the Sustainable Procurement Policy, and we're looking forward to having a discussion and looking forward to approval as you see fit. There's been a lot of rigor and attention to updating the existing procurement policy. It was drafted a number of years ago with a revision or an update required for 2020. A lot of internal consultation and vendor consultation has taken place, and we have the updates to the existing procurement policy to walk you through today for approval. I'm very proud of the city progressively putting forward a sustainable procurement policy for implementation over the next several years. It's through your leadership that you catalyzed this project, and we're super excited to bring it forward. It is a simple policy in that it is the beginning, and we hope to walk before we run, but eventually fly with this particular policy. We believe that over the next couple of years that the policies will merge. So the existing procurement policy and the sustainable procurement policy will merge and represent how the city procures with an ethical, environmental, and social lens for every procurement. Thank you again, Mayor and Council, for your leadership, and particularly to staff for the work that's been done over the last several years, bringing both of these policies to your attention today for approval. I'd also like to thank Reeve Consulting, who was instrumental in bringing the procurement policy, sustainable procurement policy, to fruition today, and all of the staff who acted on the city's behalf, bringing their concerns and their suggestions to the table with respect to the task force that's been behind it. So I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Rushton, and she will walk us through both the existing procurement policy update and the new sustainable procurement policy, which we see merging over the next couple of years. Thank you.
Good morning and welcome.
Good morning. Good morning.
Better.
Technology is not always my friend. There we go.
You should talk to me.
Good morning, and before you today is the updated procurement policy and the sustainable procurement policy. Both policies are designed to provide best practice approach and achieve best value in procuring goods, services, and construction for the city. The procurement policy was initially launched in 2017 and transformed the city from a decentralized to a centralized purchasing organization. The procurement policy provides guidance for sourcing, establishes responsibilities of various stakeholders, and controls approval, process, advertising, and contract requirements appropriate for a public institution. When launched in 2017, the key focus was staff training to ensure a smooth transition, and that training that continues today. This policy has seen overall improvements in procurement, including but not limited to a single integrated purchasing system for all municipal acquisitions, standard purchasing processes and tools, a commitment to follow those standardized corporate policies and procedures, interdepartmental coordination of purchases, and greater compliance. The revision of this policy was, as Shelley indicated, was conducted in consultation with staff, and resulting document has seen updates to definitions, removal of procedural elements that do not fit in a policy, modifications to align with new organizational structure, additions of newer trade agreements, the advice of legal counsel. Keeping this policy updated ensures current and effective document to assist in administration of the over $50 million of spend that flows through the purchasing department on an annual basis. I will end this slide with what I tell staff during the training sessions. This procurement policy is not a policy specific to the purchasing division. It is a corporate policy and governs all who procure on behalf of the city. What this policy means for staff at the city. This procurement policy serves to establish the guiding principles of sound procurement practice in a municipal environment, which are reflected in these first 3 bullets. Responsible fiscal spending and management, with fair, open, transparent procurement practices, with a reminder to ensure compliance with applicable trade agreements to which we are bound. This all leads to continued transparency and good governance and provides consistency in dealing with our vendor community. With the policy, and again to align with the trade agreements, we highlight here one element of where we can support our local economy. This $5,000 threshold may seem insignificant, but low-valued purchase transactions can total more than $1,000 in a given year. Having our departments include local business, or better yet, direct award to local firms, can translate to significant dollars being spent in our community. The decision makers at this level could be the paradigm shift in our sustainable procurement journey. By educating and empowering these staff members, these decision makers, there is an opportunity to make the shift from ordering an online from a big box multinational conglomerate who knows you as nothing but a number, to seeing if the product is available locally. That change in thought process will be pivotal to affecting the change within the city that we so need. What this policy means for vendors. Under this policy, we also establish how the city will manage competitive procurements and what this policy means for the vendor community. Again, our commitment to fair, open, and transparent purchasing practices is highlighted along with the assurance of non-discriminatory competitive selection to comply with trade agreements. The policy is supported and further enhanced with written standard operating procedures and guidance documents that are available to staff. We also state within the policy that there will be no local preference to mirror the trade agreement requirement at the greater than $25,000 threshold. On this note, I would like to commend our local vendor community for its strength, resilience, and competitive nature. We are continually rewarded with local vendors who not only compete well in today's market, but continually deliver quality goods, services, and construction projects. From the small contracts like courier services to local parts dealers and distributors to consultants and engineering specialists to the construction firms, vendors, our local vendors compete and provide the city with good value day in and day out. And we know this because they compete and they win the work. As we change, as industry changes, and as we grow, we recognize the importance of ensuring the effectiveness and appropriateness of the content of this policy. This updated policy is the work of not just the purchasing division, but the compilation of staff input and consultation that began back in February 2020. COVID, of course, had a significant impact on delaying this part of the presentation, but we are delighted to have it in front of you now. To keep pace with industry, we removed and revised and added definitions. We removed procedural elements not consistent with a policy document. We made modifications to align with the new organizational structure, added references to trade agreements not in effect in 2017, and lastly, of course, we modified from the advice of legal counsel. These changes ensure our content remains current and instills confidence in the vendor community and with staff that we are keeping pace with change. From my experience, readers tend to lose faith in a document that does not reflect or fails to address current state. Even if the document is well poised to deal with other issues such as responsible fiscal spending and management, fair, open, transparent procurement practices, or recognizes compliance with the applicable trade agreements, if the balance of the content is not relevant, the reader may tend to disregard its content and find another path. On that, I hope you will approve the procurement policy in front of you, but before we get there, let me introduce the sustainable procurement policy. The second policy we bring forward today is one you're most familiar with, the sustainable procurement policy. Allow me a moment to read an excerpt from an article written by Shift and Build called Assessing the Degree of Sustainability Integration in Canadian Public Procurement. Meaningful progress on sustainability requires that we leverage all of our available instruments. Sustainable public procurement is one severely underutilized and highly impactful mechanism. From a strategic perspective, in utilizing purchasing as a social movement, sustainable public procurement works to use capitalism's fundamental principle against itself, replacing individual self-interest with broad-based sustainability concerns. From a practical perspective, public sector purchasing makes up 13.3% of Canada's GDP and uses existing buying power to drive established policy objectives, making it an important point of leverage, a low cost, and a stewardship mechanism for taxpayers' dollars. That's an impactful statement for me. Over the past year, we have brought forward to Council presentations that highlighted the purpose and scope of this policy. This policy will serve as a signal of the city's passion and resolve in creating a livable, sustainable city for all. We have made this policy aspirational in nature, but in my mind, this does not diminish its importance. This policy is a landmark on which City will build the remaining elements of our program. It will be the rock from which the ripples of sustainability will form, and to coin a phrase from our consultant Tim, we get to go doing the do. I believe many of you are old enough to remember when green was nothing but a buzzword, and I recall buyers rolling their eyes as we initiated a call for vendors to bring forward their initiatives for saving energy, reducing packaging, saving the planet. But here we are now where green is part of our everyday. We get it. We understand it. Wouldn't it be great if we start to see a future where, as an organization, along with our vendors, recognizing the other sustainable elements and get those as we do the green? What this means for staff. We will start by further developing tools. We will assess projects during the planning phase for any sustainable risks and opportunities. We will incorporate these into specific solicitations, and we will engage the vendor community to ensure their readiness to respond. And throughout, we will evaluate the program and improve the tools and practices. With this policy document, we will have the green light to proceed, and we are excited to see where the journey will take us. Vendor communications, gauging vendor readiness will be an essential part of the program, but we already see change, from restaurants hiring diverse workers to electrical companies greening their fleet. We know there are vendors out there who are already ahead of the curve. And finally, purchasing staff are excited to officially launch the program and advance sustainability through select procurements. We will continue to engage the working group and further develop the tools. We will write standard operating procedures to help guide staff, and we will develop a training plan for staff and will create vendor communications plan. This summer, we will identify meaningful measurements for reporting, identifying commodities for vendor engagement, and procure items from the HIPPO list. We look forward to more success stories that highlight where sustainable procurements have had a purposeful impact. Before I close, I want to take a moment to thank staff for their invaluable input into this policy. Their time and effort shows the strong commitment we have as an organization to our sustainable journey. I also want to acknowledge Councillor Hemmons for inspiring us to take the first steps. And of course, thank you, Council, for your support and encouragement. I believe we have Reeve Consulting in the background, but we'll open the floor for questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Goodness gracious, am I going to have to? Thank you. Councillor Hemmons?
Thank you, and thank you to you, Ms. Rushton, for all of your work on this. Referring to the process section of the Sustainable Procurement Policy, summer 2021, is that the timeline you've put to developing a toolkit?
Sorry, yes.
Okay.
There we go. We're going to continue through now until July and continue to develop our toolkit and all the elements of a great sustainable procurement program. It's July when we get our new buying position, so that's the correlation. We want to make sure that we're staffed well to be able to respond to the vendor community and keep them engaged and keep them moving forward.
Wonderful. Okay, thank you. Really excited for this work.
Councillor Brown?
Thank you, Worship. Not a question. I have a lot of thoughts on this, and they're all positive, and I just want to say thank you very much. It's not too often, I think, that you get inspired by something that's like financial in nature, and just that presentation alone was very inspiring, so thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Turley, please.
Thank you, Worship. I have to say I'm in full agreement with everything except one I'm a little concerned about how the determination about it is going to take place, and that's the fair compensation, living wage. We all know, and some of us who've been in the working world for 50 plus years, not everything is equal. And I just don't understand how, when you compare cost of living in Community A versus Community B, there's a difference. There's also a difference in the how the employees are paid either hourly, monthly, benefits. There's all kinds of variations, and I'm curious as to how this is going to work into the determination.
Ms. Rushton, please.
Through your worship to Councillor Turley, thank you for that question. We too deliberated on this element often and a lot. To Ms. Legan's point, we want to be able to walk before we run, before we fly. And we recognize that a living wage is a separate entity, and we need to treat that as such. We will look for equity in wages in our documents through our minimum wage requirement, but we don't want to put that into this policy at this point in time. We don't feel we're ready, but we will get there in a next iteration. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm relieved to hear that. Thank you.
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Worship. And like other councillors, I'm also very much in favor of this. I'm glad that it's here in front of us. I do have some questions on the, first on the social, not the, first on the procurement document, if I may. 3.4.1, number 8. Where the city can strictly prove that one contractor is qualified or available to provide goods. My question here is, how do you prove that? And the other question is, who do you prove it to?
Sorry, which number again?
It's 3.4.1, and it's number 8.
Oh, okay.
Single source procurement part. Yeah.
Thank you. Through the chair to Councillor Bonner. So this is single sourcing, and we as a government agency have many peers through other municipalities and regional districts. Where we can prove this is through the work that these consultants or other, whatever we're seeking, have done work for other organizations. We would look for references. We would look for that clarity that they have done good work in a similar realm that what we're looking for. So that's how we would validate that. Does that?
And the second part is who are we proving it to? Does that then show up in our quarterly report that this is the proof that this person or this organization was the sole source?
The quarterly report just brings in front of council the award itself. We don't go to the granular level of showing you how we got there. Does that make sense?
It does, but doesn't answer my question.
Okay, sorry, what was the?
I think someone else might pop in.
Maybe you could either speak up or... Ms. Lagan.
Yeah.
Your Worship, thank you through you to Councillor Bonner. Thank you for your question. Single source is something we take very seriously at the city with respect to approvals. The approvals are internal. Jane, as the purchasing manager, Ms. Rushton as the purchasing manager, usually requires a GM level signature or sign off that the criteria has been met for single source. The Roman numeral 8 is one of the elements that could be in play to approve a single source. It's seldom that this one actually is met, that there is only one person effectively or one organization that can meet a need. Where I see this in prior organizations has been where a consulting firm or firm has done 80% of the work on a project and we need to leverage up rather than pay again for that learning curve. So there is definitely a benefit to the taxpayer by using this type of mechanism. So this is one that isn't often actioned. The other criteria are actioned more often than not.
Okay. Yeah, and I've seen it many times, like, BC Hydro supplies power because they're the only one that does it. We have engineers because they did all the work prior to that sort of thing. So I think that's my understanding. The next one is 3.5, unsolicited bids. I've written a Y beside there. Unsolicited bids received by the city will be reviewed by the department head and the managing purchase stores and designate. Award of an unsolicited bid is due so on a non-competitive basis, therefore single source provisions apply to this policy. So is this to say that if I were to send the city an unsolicited bid to sell you something, that automatically guarantees I'm a sole source? I mean, you're looking at this wrong. That's good.
Through the chair to Councillor Bonner, thank you for the question. There's a multiple of layers that exist over top of this, so it has to fit some criteria. First of all, under that $75,000 threshold is critical. The need, of course, is also critical. So if it's something that a department isn't aware of, if it's something that we've been looking for but had failed to find, Only in those instances would this all come into play. But we may also want to, now that we've been made aware of it, may want to do other engagement pieces, such as a notice of intent that would solidify in our mind that this company is the only one that can do it, because it's been brought to our attention. Maybe it's not a single or sole source. So there's a number of elements that we would put in play before we actually got here.
Okay, thank you. The next one is exclusion of vendors, 4.3. I don't see an appeal process in here. If a vendor wished to appeal under this, how would that take place, if that is an option?
Thank you for the question. Through the chair to Councillor Bonner, we have written standard operating procedures that support this. So it would, depending on the severity, would go all the way to Mr. Jake Rudolph to sign off on if we were to actually use this clause. So it would have, we do have steps to make sure that we do our due diligence and we're not exposing the city to additional risk by excluding a vendor.
Okay, thank you. One more.
Councillor Armstrong just wants to respond quickly.
Okay. The last one is, I didn't quite understand it. It's section 10.1.9, where no employee or council member shall use personal property for personal advantage, except where such personal property is offered through city programs open to the public. I'm not understanding that, because like this is my personal property and I use it to write down to my advantage questions. So I'm just not understanding this one. If someone could explain it to me.
Thank you. Through the chair to Councillor Bonner. So this particular item is an item for which we want council and staff to be aware that we want their personal, we don't want personal preferences or, I'm sorry, I'm struggling with this. Can you help me with this one?
Ms. Lagan.
I'm sorry, this seems to be a legacy clause that might have a story behind it, and we'll do a little bit of work to delve into it, because I am not apprised of its exact purpose either. I apologize for that.
Oh, it's okay.
Councillor Armstrong has
Part of that would be if you want to start using your own vehicle when there's a city vehicle applied that you can use, and then you start getting the money for dollars for that. So that's one of the reasons they do it. The same thing with, you try and claim your own personal cell phone when you've been given a city cell phone.
Okay.
Those are part of that rationale behind it, at least in the federal government.
Yeah,
That's
and I
just-
could
that's the
see it,
saving there.
you know, if I'm using my own, private property of my house or something like that as well, I can see that. It just, if you read it as it is says, it's literally my pen, because it's my personal property. Yeah.
Ms. Lagan.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a follow-up comment. It may, in fact, be something that we look at revising and moving into an HR policy in the future, because I think it's probably more applicable there. But we'll work on that particular one. It's benign at this point in the policy, I believe. Thank you.
Thank you. My next question is on the social procurement part, which I'm very much interested in. I think many of council are. Can we go through maybe a process of how this would work if you have two vendors in front of you making a bid on the same item? How do we use social procurement as I'm seeing in this policy, and how do they know what they should be putting in their RFP or their RFX?
Through the chair to Councillor Bonner, thank you again for the question. We will have multiple iterations of a document one of the ideas that I have is we will have multiple iterations of a document where we will publish it first in draft form and get vendor feedback from, so that we're not only gauging vendors' readiness, but we're also preparing them to be ready, so that if the questions aren't clear, or if we're not able to attain some element of sustainability from the vendor community, perhaps we need to scale that back, or perhaps we find from vendor engagement in this instance that they're able to escalate, and there's more to be gained through the sustainability element. With all of our documents, they will go out with the criteria and a number of questions that support that criteria, so that we're very, very clear on what it is we're looking for in terms of a response. So it's not just tell us what your sustainability is, it'll be the exact criteria that fits that particular opportunity. So if it's diverse employment, or if it's apprenticeships, or whatever we're looking for, it will be very granularly identified within the document once we publish the final document.
Okay, thank you. If there are no more questions, I would move the staff recommendation.
There are.
Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Gesselbrock?
Well, thank you. I've just got a comment. Thank you so much for the work on this. It's always striking to hear about the 13.3% of GDP that's contributed by local government spending, and I think it's pretty clear that where our dollars go play a big role in the community that we want to see. I'm really excited to watch our organizational capacity grow and using our purchasing power to develop a stronger local economy and environmentally sustainable and socially just future. So a big thank you to Tim Reeve for his expertise in helping develop this policy, and then also a huge thank you to staff for excellent work on this and your leadership and dedication. So thank you so much, and I'm excited about this.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. If I may, quickly, I don't have a question, but I did wish to also acknowledge the work of staff on this. Ms. Rushton, I was impressed with your presentation this morning and with the document, and I think this policy update is very important and very timely as well. I was also impressed that one of the first statements I read in the report was an emphasis on responsible fiscal spending. And I'm sure Councillor Turley agrees with me that that is something we always need to keep in focus. But beyond that, I think we also need to acknowledge that as this policy plays out and is followed, that we will be trusting the expertise of yourself and our staff and their integrity in interpreting this and applying it. And there have been legacy issues. And I'm really pleased to see that as we move forward, there's a solid governance framework that staff can apply when we're dealing with vendors. So thank you very much.
Councillor Marmon.
Thank you. I just wanted to say a simple thank you for all of this work, and echoing everybody else's comments. Thank you.
I have a couple of comments and questions, Ms. Rushton. Firstly, again, thank you for the work that you and other staff have put into this. You know, we all speak to what I call the high-minded ideals of how we want to do things, but it's your staff who actually have to do the work on the ground and implement this and make it practical. And so when they're faced with competing bids and et cetera, what sort of feedback are you getting from staff? And be candid, please. And several pages of policy. With great respect, I don't think most of us are going to have that circulating through our mind when some document arrives on our desk, unless something really strikes us. So in a practical way, are staff satisfied that this can be implemented in a way that meets the goals of council, but at the same time doesn't make their job impossibly bureaucratic in terms of coming to a decision?
Thank you. From a procurement staff perspective, I don't want to overuse the word, but they are excited. They're ready, they're wanting to implement this as soon as they can. From an overall staff perspective, we've engaged a working group, and their thoughtful input has been incredibly valuable to help us frame and understand their concerns, and they too are willing to go forward. Their participation in the working group shows that, and there is some, I won't say reluctance, but questions in their mind. How are we going to do this? But with purchasing staff's excitement, I'm very confident that we will be able to overcome any of the doubts that are out there, that we will be able to engage the vendor community and assure them that if they're not ready, we'll wait until they are, or if they're ready, we're ready to.
Is it fair to say that staff were ahead of the politicians on this, so to speak, that probably some of the things that are now contained in the policy are in fact things that staff were doing in a practical day-to-day approach?
From the success stories that we gathered and brought forward to you in one of our presentations, I would say with a resounding yes.
Thank you very much. I have no further questions. Councillor Armstrong? Councillor Armstrong moves. Councillor Bonner seconds. Any discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous? None opposed? Thank you very much. Appreciate the presentation this morning, and good luck with this.
Thank you.
The next is the 2021 Social Planning Grant Recommendations. Mr. Lindsay, good morning.
Good morning, Your Worship, Council. Thank you for the opportunity to be here to present the 2021 Social Planning Grant recommendations to the committee for your consideration. As you are aware, this is an annual program, and as outlined in the report, we would normally have $85,000 to disperse through this grant program. Last fall, Council allocated an additional $30,000 that we received through the community amenity contributions for the cannabis retail store, some of the cannabis retail store rezonings that we had over the past year. So that increased the amount of money that we're actually able to provide through the grant program this year. So it's for a total of $115,000. Mr. Stewart, who is our social planner and author of this report and manager of this process, is here with us this morning. And if there's any specific questions Council has about any of the grants, I'm sure that he would be available to answer those questions. Thank you, Worship.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lindsay. Any questions? Councillor Armstrong?
No, I was just going to move the recommendation.
And seconded? Councillor Martman? Any discussion? All those in favor?
It's pretty straightforward.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Mr. Stewart, I'm glad you didn't have to get up off your chair this morning. The next is Community Program Development Grant and IMO Science and Sustainability Society. And that's Mr. Harding. Good morning.
Good morning, Your Worship. Ms. Work is also here to answer any questions. Ask Linda to come up if she's here. Just a program grant for the Science and Sustainability organization. They meet all the criteria of the grant. This is a grant that's there to help groups get up and running. It's not a long-term grant. It's supposed to help them start a new program, a new service, and be able to answer any questions you may have on the program, or this grant particularly.
I do.
Councillor Armstrong and then
Actually have a
Councillor
question
Bonner.
this time. You said that there was 2 that applied, but I only see 1 there. Was the other one not applicable?
The other one, I'll ask them to say what it was, but they didn't make the criteria, so we didn't include
That
it.
was just my question, so didn't make criteria. Thank you.
Councillor Bonner?
Thank you, Worship. I do have a question about this one. I'm quite in favor of this organization getting money. They do great work in our community. The grant stream, though, the criteria says either new or expanding. And the definition here used for expanding was 2 new parks. is it 2 additional parks or just 2 different parks that we're looking at here?
Ms. Moore, good
Through the
morning.
mayor to Councillor Bonner, it is 2 additional parks, so it's an expansion of the program.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Thorpe.
Well, thank you, Your Worship. Through you, my question was similar to Councillor Bonner's. I just wanted to check with Mr. Hardinger, Ms. Wark. This is the same organization that at one time was proposing sort of a permanent home in Bowen Park,
That's correct.
and now they operate in various different locations, and they're just wanting to expand.
That's correct. And particularly, they're expanding this program. They have a number of other programs, but it's particularly this program for expansion.
Right, thank you.
Would someone care to move Councillor Armstrong, seconded Councillor Martman? Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. I just might say that given what you read about the nations of the world that are leading us economically, that anything that improves the science level of students in a nation or a city or a community is a really important thing. So delighted to see them apply for this and delighted to see it approved. We are now down to what I will call the hope item. Proposed bid for the 2026 BC Summer Games. Mr. Harding.
Thank you, Worship and Council. Very pleased to be able to come and ask your support for us to submit a bid for the 2026 Games. As you can see in the report, it's been a number of years since we've hosted the Games. And when I say host, this is truly a community-hosted event. This is not a City of Nanaimo staff event. This is a broad, very broad community multi-agency event that brings all sorts of the part of the community together. And so looking for support for us to develop the bid so we can get it in on time. They've extended the bid date because of the COVID issues. They've expanded the deadline, and we're just trying to meet the new deadline.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. To get this on the floor, I'd be very pleased to move the recommendation, and then I would like to speak briefly to it.
Please, seconded Councillor Brown. Mr. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I just want to comment that the other day we were discussing tourism and event tourism and its importance came up, and this is just such a prime example of something that combines local event tourism with attracting other people to our community. And I've been very fortunate to have been involved directly in all 3 of the previous summer games, and I can speak to what a huge boost they are to our local economy and to pride of our community. I can't speak highly enough of the impact that these games have and how they positively affect our citizens and the visitors that we see come to our community. So I think this is a wonderful opportunity, and I will be in full support of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. In order, Councillors Bonner, Turley, and then Armstrong.
Thank you, Worship. I'm curious how this came to council. I mean, was it the organization committee in Nanaimo that requested us to put in anything, or was this a city-driven thing?
So, so the BC Summer Games sends out a letter of request to municipalities to consider a number of games. So we received that letter earlier last year, but given with COVID, we didn't bring a report to council until, because we're, particularly recreation staff, are very focused on other matters. And so as staff, we went together looking at the date, looking at 2026, thinking this community's definitely ready to try this again. So it's staff bringing it forward based on a letter of request that does come into the City of Nanaimo from the main agency.
Thank you. I'm very much in favor of this. I had the honor of being the stage manager for the 2002 games that were here. And that happened to be held on the coldest day of August on record. It was very chilly that day and windy. My question then is, have we ever considered hosting the North American Indigenous Games, which unfortunately were canceled in 2020 out of Halifax, but I know that they're looking for the 2024 host city. And I thought it might be a similar thing that we could possibly look into.
I mean, Your Worship, to the Council upon, I know we've assisted in the organizations, particularly when it was in Cowichan, I believe. I was doing one, or they met at the National, where we provided the venues to assist some of the venues. We have not worked with First Nations on doing that bid package, but those are the types of things we can reach out for and look at other things. We believe our facilities are getting to a point where, they're available for providing that kind of venues and infrastructure to host things like this.
Thank you.
Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Worship. Yeah, I too concur with Councillor Thorpe and Councillor Bonner, because I too have been involved in, I can't remember if I was involved in the 85 one or not, but definitely the last two I was. I think my only concern, and it's only a concern, is that the two previous ones anyway involved a huge, I mean really huge, volunteer component to make sure these are successful. And I guess my question would be, have we got any indication from the community as now yet as to whether there's a burning desire by whatever parts of the community to actually host these games again? Because the worst fear would be that, we were allocated the games and then the volunteerism is not what it should be, and therefore the success of the games may not be what it should be. And I don't know if Mr. Harding has received any input from the different sporting groups in the community as to whether the appetite is there to do it again.
Thank you, Worship.
Harding.
Through the Councillor Turley, as staff, as we work with many different sporting organizations always, throughout the year, it's one of those things we continue to talk about, volunteer fatigue. And that's one of the reasons we felt that 2026, we think the community would be very well set for that. There's nothing major in between now and that event that would provide some fatigue to the volunteer base. And again, as we develop the bid package, and if we are successful, then of course that work goes out to all those different groups and organizations. But as we're going through, for example, as we're going through the Reimagine process and all our stakeholder groups, there's a lot of discussion in those stakeholder groups about us, how we're going to bring people back to the community and showing off some of the things we do. So we felt there's a lot of, during the stakeholder engagement through Reimagine, there was a lot of positive feelings towards with different groups and organizations that we met with.
Thank you.
Councillor Armstrong.
Well, thank you. That was along my question too, because I know security was an issue last time, and the police bill went up considerably because they had to bring in extra members. So when we're looking at these, do we include the cost of overtime in the police budget, which I think was close to 70 or 80,000?
We work with the RCMP on, sorry, Your Worship, through Councillor Armstrong. We work, and the RCMP are actually usually part of the committee, that one of the other key parts of the committee in the organizing group. And so for many of our events, the RCMP do not charge us for all the different events we do. Back in the bathtub days or other major events, they don't come back with a separate bill for us on the overtime.
No, I'm just saying because they do charge us in overtime. Because
do.
most
It's just- it
everybody is
doesn't- it
in on
doesn't-
overtime
yeah.
for those events, and we haven't been tracking it that way, and I think that's something that needs to be tracked. Like, I can only look at I'll look at the Olympics, for example, when the budget was supposed to be like 250 million, the actual budget for security was closer to $1 billion. And not that we're at the same level, but I do think that's something we should be tracking when we're looking at, because it still is taxpayers' dollars coming out of the police budget. So just something I would like to see tracked. Thank you.
If I may say, Mr. Harding, I'm delighted to see this on the agenda. If there was ever a winter where people didn't have a lot to look forward to, a more depressing time in recent history, it is now. And with a hospitality industry, with many of its members, owners, workers just hanging on by literally the skin of their teeth, I think looking forward to this, as Councillor Thorpe started off this discussion, and what it means for the community is just incredibly important. And of all the things we may do as council, this is one that is clear and people understand and get it. This is a signal to the community that we have confidence in the future, and we are getting excited about things that are going to come in the future, that there will be some return to normal. And having been around for a couple of these games as MLA and not had to do much work, but just show up and display my pretty face, ho-ho, I want to say the enthusiasm it brings, what it means for young people, the kind of camaraderie, the community building, the the building of relationships across all kinds of boundaries are just so important. So I don't want to wax on too much, but I'm delighted to see this go forward. And I think, as I say, it's a really important signal to the community that Nanaimo, now that we have 102,000 people, has joined the big leagues of cities, and this is another expression of our confidence. So if no one else wishes to say anything, let's call the vote. All those in favor? None contrary. Thank you very much, everyone. I'm not going to do this 2 meetings in a row, but Councillor Brown is moving adjournment. We have no other business. Seconded, Councillor Armstrong. All those in favor? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Thank you to staff for attending this morning.